Hi everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm just going to turn all of my little beepy noises off. Put everything onto airplane, and hopefully you can hear me. So if you can hear me, just give me a bit of a wave, say hello. I've got my microphone here. I'm hoping that it's loud enough, so just say hello and give me a bit of a wave, and then I can kind of talk you through what we're going to do this evening, which hopefully is going to be exciting. So yeah, just give me a bit of a hello that you can hear me. Okay, because there's quite a lag behind what I'm saying and then what you end up hearing. So as soon, oh, you can hear me. That's brilliant. Thanks, Sarah. That's fantastic. Loud and clear. Wonderful. Right. Okay. So I'm going to make a start. And what we're doing is we're going to be again working on the Spaniel. Last week we kind of worked on the ear. We got some really sort of rough colours and shapes and everything down, but actually it turned out really well. I've seen quite a few of your pieces that you've done, and I'm, oh my goodness, so impressed. They're absolutely gorgeous. So tonight what I thought we'd do is we'd just look at this top bit up here. And I've got 3 pencils that I'm going to start with. They are the Studios. There's the Burnt Yellow Ochre, the Copper Beech and the Raw Umber. Now, if you don't have these, don't panic, okay? So if you don't have the Studios, grab something like, let's have a look here. Grab something like a Burnt Ochre, something like a Bista, probably something like a Burnt Sienna. Just, you know, anything that's sort of like orangey browny. So don't panic if you don't have exactly the same pencils as me. The reason I'm using the Studios, the Derwent Studios, the reason I'm using these is because they're hard. They're wax pencils, they're hard, and it means that when I put them down on the pastel matte surface, that you don't get as much grain. So they're really nice for those initial layers. I'm going to start with the Burnt Yellow Ochre. Now, I haven't got anything under my hand. Just checking I've cleaned my nails, and I have. I haven't got anything underneath my hand, and I would recommend that you always work with something underneath your hand, because the oils and everything get onto your paper. But I haven't got anything under my hand because it's a bit of a pain when I'm doing this sort of thing. So I've got my Burnt Yellow Ochre, and what I'm going to start to do is actually sketch in some of these hairs. Again, like we were doing last week, very sketchy. Very sketchy, and just kind of blocking these colours in. So, and I'm going to go in the direction of the fur, and I'm just sort of going to just basically just sketch the colour in, and you can see hopefully that it's, in fact I might just zoom in a little bit more so you can see a bit better. Let me just double check. I want you to be able to see it. Yeah, that's okay. And I'm just going to focus in on that just so you can see it. Oops, there we go. So I'm just going to, and it's just these light sketchy strokes, really light pressure. Now my light pressure, I'll show you again what my light pressure looks like with my big fat hand, but my light pressure is not indenting the skin of my hand. Okay, so that's what my light pressure looks like. You can see on here I haven't got a huge amount of information when it comes to my line drawing, but I'm just, and the other thing as well is I haven't got a super sharp pencil. This is a brand new pencil, and this is how it came, so I haven't sharpened it. And actually the other thing I want to do is just make it so that that's a bit better. So I've got a piece of hair coming in over here. Now we know it's going to be looking, or it could look a little bit horrible for a bit. We know that that's going to happen. And if we always set ourselves expectations, I think with anything, with art, setting yourself an expectation so that you can cope with things if it does go a little bit wrong. You know, and it's this week more than ever in the UK, it's you know, it's important to make sure that you're doing things that actually are okay for you and you're not getting stressed. It's Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK, and you know, we can get really stressed about things, and it doesn't have to be major things. It can be, you know, quite minor things, or they seem minor to other people, but to us they can seem, you know, really quite major. And if you're spending time on a drawing and you know you're really looking forward to drawing something and it doesn't turn out as you expect it to, it can be really frustrating and it can be very downheartening, and it can in some circumstances, you know, mean that people stop drawing, you know, altogether. You know, it doesn't have to be like that. So I think setting expectations, I think, is a really good thing with our art, especially if we're sort of like either beginning or we're moving up the levels or something like that. As long as we know what to expect, then you know, when we get to those parts where it's not working very well or it's looking a little bit ugly, you know, we can then sort of say to ourselves, do you know, yeah, I expected this and it's fine because I know that, you know, we're going to get through this and I know what to do to be able to, you know, get through it. So that's all okay. So you can see here how I'm just sort of gently, just bringing in these little sort of curl bits. This dog has got the most beautiful coloured hair. I mean, she really has. This sort of hair is an absolute joy, you know, to draw, because you've got all of the really deep colours, and then you've got all of these gorgeous sort of yellowy browny colours, and they're just lovely. And once you get sort of these initial sort of sketchy bits in, you can really start to bring in, you know, some of those there's like reddy bits in there, orangey bits in there, pinky bits in there. You know, it's lovely. But if you start to bring those colours in too soon, before you've kind of got your kind of foundation in, then, you know, you can kind of get a little bit lost, really. So that's why I'm kind of using the base, this burnt yellow ochre, as a base. And other studios light fast. Carol, there are many of the studios that aren't light fast. The colours that I use tend to be light fast. I don't get that het up about light fastness, to be honest. When they do the light fast, I think it's important. Of course it's important, and I'm not saying it's not important. But when they do the testing, they do it on one layer of pencil. And they do it, obviously, the blue wool testing, they do it out in the sunshine and all of that type of stuff, and it's important that they do that. However, we don't use one layer of pencil. We might use 10 layers of pencil, or 50 layers of pencil. And, you know, the pencils are marketed to be, you know, when you frame them and you put them on your wall, you need to keep them and have them located in museum quality conditions. And I would say the majority of us don't do that either. So I wouldn't get too hung up on light fastness. I think it is important. But if you've got a colour that you absolutely love and it's incorporated within other colours, it's not just one single block of colour, you know, then I wouldn't be too worried about it, to be honest. But the colours that I use are the more light fast ones, you know, and I mean there's less light fast colours in all of the brands, and I do know in the studios there's, you know, the majority of them aren't as light fast, but that's not something I worry about too much. And I'm not using, it tends to be like the light pinks and the light purples and stuff like that, and you know, I don't use those anyway. So you can see that this is starting to kind of come together, you know, and all I'm doing is just lightly sketching that really nice soft pressure, just bringing in, and then you can start to kind of see how the hair is working. We can just bring in some sort of soft waves in here as well. This is the burnt yellow ochre, the Studio burnt yellow ochre. This is one of my favourite pencils. I just think it's the most fantastic colour. And actually it's going to be, we're going to kind of cover over it quite a bit with other colours, but it's just a really good colour. So I'm just going to come down here and just bring this little bit of a wave in as well. So if we can kind of get these sort of bits of floaty hair in there as well. Now, a lot of the time what happens when we do sort of like a little bit of a floaty hair that comes off the head, what happens is it ends up looking like, I don't know, like a sort of piece of string or a sausage or something sort of flying off the dog's head. And what I would suggest is that, especially on pastel mat, once you've put that little bit of hair in, just go in over the top with your putty eraser and just kind of soften it off a little bit, so that you've got a semblance of hair that's coming off the head rather than sort of like a big clump. It's much easier when you're working on white paper and you've got like a palish colour that's sort of coming up off the head. But you know, sometimes it can just look like sort of stalks of something. You know, so using the putty eraser just to kind of just soften it as you go, a little bit like we were doing, well, very much like we were doing on the ear. You know, you kind of bring in your highlighty bits in there, and you know, which is going to help you with the form. So that's what I'm doing here, just bringing in a few of those little highlighty bits. It seems like you're deleting everything or erasing everything that you've just put down, but actually it means that you can start to get some really nice idea of how the hair is working and where the highlights and everything are. So if we're just so we know that this is quite a dark area that we put in last week, so I'm just going to come in here again. You know, if you can be quite sketchy and free with your pencil strokes, it means that you're going to capture the quality of that fur. I mean, the hair on top of the head is soft, it's kind of floaty, you know, full of character. And you need to be able to capture that, you know, especially for this type of dog. Capturing the character that you get in the fur quality is really important. So nice, smooth, long lines. And when I do my tutorials as well, I tend to kind of almost speak at the same pace as I'm kind of drawing fur. So if I'm drawing something that's really long and smooth, and you know, my speech kind of follows, you know, in the same sort of speed. Whereas if I'm drawing like little choppy fur bits, then my speech might speed up a little bit, you know. But it's if you can just sort of try to get that lovely long feeling of your pencil strokes, then you're going to be able to get that nice feeling of that lovely silky fur on the top there. And then we can come in and we can just pull out some of these little highlighty bits. Now this is just sort of layer 1, layer 2, you know, if we've gone over a few times, and already, you know, we're starting to get quite a nice feel for the top of this head. So this is the pastel matte board that I'm using. It's the white board, so it is smoother. So I know that pastel matte has all sorts of quality issues and everything, and it is down to the manufacturing process. You know, and they obviously do have you know, quality control, but I think that sadly, you know, at the moment as well, when everybody's in lockdown and all of that type of stuff, I think there's probably, you know, they're probably struggling a little bit there. But that being said, pastel matte really is the most fabulous paper to draw on. I will only draw on the smoother pastel matte. If I get a really, really, really gritty piece, then I just won't use it. It's too frustrating, and that it's annoying because it's expensive. You know, it is expensive paper, but you know, I mean, and then they're pretty good at returning, you know. So if you've got a piece and it's got some quality issues, they're pretty good at having it returned and replacing it. So, you know, if you are having issues with your pastel mat, I would say return it. I'm just going to grab a mouthful of tea. Okay, so we've got these lovely yellowy bits in here. Let's just bring a little bit more into there. And a little bit onto the top of this bit here. And you can see how nice and softly the studios work on the pastel mat as an initial layer. Now, I love the studios. If you're using them on a smooth paper, they're fantastic as an initial layer. But if you try to start layering them in over the top of other pencils on smooth paper, they don't work as well. And it's because they are so subtle with the pigment. It's much harder to kind of layer over the top. Melissa, I'm fairly new to coloured pencil drawings and have always used just normal paper. As I'm improving, I want to lay down more layers of pencil, but I'm frightened of pastel mat. Oh. Yeah, don't be frightened of pastel mat. But what I would say, Melissa, is if you're just using normal paper, why don't you go for something like a smooth paper, like a Bristol Vellum, a Fabriano. I'm using some really nice paper at the minute called Hannah Müller Nostalgie, and I'm really, really enjoying that. It's got it has got a texture to it, but it's really smooth, and I'm finding I can get a lot of layers down on that. So you don't have to have pastel mat, and by all means have a try with it. But you can use normal paper, and with normal paper, with your hot press watercolor papers, you can still get a lot of layers down. So don't be scared. Is there a difference between the pastel mat sheets and pastel mat pads? Well, there shouldn't be a difference. I'm just going to start using the raw umber here, and I'm just going to start to bring this sort of secondary colour in, just to bring it. This is sort of like it's like a greeny brown, and when you look at the photograph, I will come back to you, Wendy. When you look at the photograph, you'll be thinking, well, why is she putting greeny brown in there? Now it's quite reddy, quite orangey, and then we've got this lovely chocolatey colour around it. But if you just stick with your warm colours, you're going to have something that looks very, very red. So balancing it out with something like a raw umber, which is more of a greeny brown, a greeny sort of yellowy brown, then it's gonna balance it out, and it's gonna look more realistic. So I would always say, even if you can't necessarily see a greeny brown somewhere, I'd always introduce it somewhere. So all I'm doing here is just sort of like pulling in this, almost defining some of these strands of hair, even though we're not really looking at detail or anything, but it's just about just defining those little bits and just getting a little bit of this colour in. So going back to your question, Wendy, there shouldn't be a difference at all. They should all be the same, but there is a difference. I find with the pads, they tend to be, some of the darker colours can be really, really grainy. And I find the board, the pastel matte board, which is what I'm using here, I find that to be the most consistent in quality and the smoothest. So I only buy the board. It is frustrating, but there's no alternative. That's the thing. There's no viable alternative that's sort of even a little bit like pastel matte. It's such a nice paper. They work fine on smooth paper if you keep them sharp. Yes, that's exactly it, Kate. So smooth paper, I'm working, although saying that, I'm working on the smooth Nostalgia at the minute, and I haven't sharpened my pencils once, I don't think, when I'm drawing the owl, and I don't think I've sharpened my pencils once, but then I am particularly lazy, so, but they do tend to work better with sharper pencils. In fact, I'm finding the Hannah Müller Nostalgie, I'm using blunter pencils because it can indent very, very easily. So if you use super sharp pencils, you can actually get an embossed line, which is not something that I want. So, that's something else to kind of think about. Right, so I think I'm going to come with the Copper Beech. And I'm going to, in fact, am I going to use the Copper Beech? to bring in some of these darker colours. Let's just bring in the copper beech and see what it's like. It might be that I just need to actually incorporate. Oh no, that's okay. So this is the copper beech, which is a really lovely brown, but I need to put a little bit of blue in this as well. So I might just bring in some of the start to bring in a few of the polychromos, like the walnut brown. I don't know whether I included dark indigo, to be honest. I use a lot of blue. I must have included dark indigo. Maybe I didn't. Oh well. I can include it if I need to. I like to use blues with my browns because I find that it kind of brings out sort of some of those chocolatey colours, which you know, it just makes them stand out a little bit better, and they look really nice. And the dark indigo polychromos works really well with the walnut brown. So again, I haven't changed my pressure at all. I'm just sort of starting to bring in a few of these sort of darkish areas. Not really working on details or anything like that, just sort of more colour blocking than anything. And I think we probably need to bring in just a little bit of this around the dog's head, and then I can show you about using the blues in with the browns. Start to bring that in a little bit there. Okay, so I'm going to get the walnut brown. Right, walnut brown, and I don't think I mentioned dark indigo, but I'm going to choose a dark indigo anyway, I think. If I can find one. Dark indigo. Right, okay, so we've got these three here. These are polychromos. I've got the walnut brown, and I've got the Caput Mortem violet, and then I've got the dark indigo, which is this one. Now this dog has got some really nice sort of chocolatey colours in it, and I find that using a dark blue in with the browns and the reddy colours really brings out that chocolatey colour. So what I might do is I might actually start on somewhere that's quite dark brown, which is kind of around this little bit here. I might start with some Caput Mortem violet. Now, if I bring the polychromos in, this is going to have quite a lot of pigment. It's much more pigmented than the studios. So I have to be quite careful about how I'm controlling where that pigment is going. And it can seem, this isn't so bad, but it can seem a little gritty. Just because there's a lot of pigment going down, and it is slightly softer than the studios. So I'm just coming in here, just sort of picking up these darker areas around that little bit of the highlight there, and I'm using the Caput Mortem violet as an initial layer, because the brown is really it's you know, it's a really nice sort of chocolatey rich brown. Okay, and then I'm going to use my putty eraser, and I'm just going to pull in just a few little highlighty bits there and in here. I know this isn't a spaniel's ear that we're drawing, but it's kind of the same hair. I just thought if we can get this bit done, kind of mostly done tonight, that would be quite good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the dark indigo in over the top of the Caput Mortem violet. Now, one of the things you must be careful of if you're layering anywhere near or around or over something that's yellow based, if you go over it with the dark indigo, you are going to get green, because that's what happens when you put yellow and blue together, you get green. So that needs to be something that you're aware of. With something like this, all you need to do is just cover a little bit of the yellowy colour with the red, and then the blue mixes with the red instead, and then you get like a magenta-y colour. So, you know, that's what I would say. If you are kind of putting sort of blue near yellowy colours, then, or orangey colours, then either use violet instead, or just kind of put a little bit of the red in over the top of the yellow, and then you don't get the green colour. And you can start to kind of, so you've got your Caput Mortem violet, then your dark blue, then your Caput Mortem violet, then your dark blue, and you can just start to build up your Spaniel's hair on the forehead like that. Just gives it a little bit of an idea of the form of it. Okay. When I put GMT +1, is that really confusing to everybody? Because that's actually what we are in the UK at the minute. We are Greenwich Mean Time +1, but I don't know whether that's confusing to people. So this is the Caput Mortem violet again, just coming in over the top there. And you can see here that it's starting to make sort of quite a nice sort of chocolatey colour, and then I can bring my walnut brown in, still really, really light layers, light pressure. I can start to bring my walnut brown in a little bit here. And then what I would do is bring in one of my magic pencils, which is, oops, I'll end up with them all over the floor, which is my Pablo Granite Rose. So this is one of the magic pencils here. And what I would do is I would start to smooth out the colour. So you'll notice when you put your colour down with your darker pencils, it goes really grainy and horrible and gritty. But then as soon as you use the light colour in over the top, like I'm doing here with this Granite Rose, over the top of the red and the blue, it will smooth it out and you get a really nice surface to be able to work on. And then you can go in and start to add your details in, because that gives you a much smoother base to work from. So you kind of build your layers, smooth it out, and then come in and add your details, which works really, really nicely. You can see how we can just carry on sort of building that little bit there and building it round. So I'm going to use the light yellow ochre again in here, just in here where that bit of a highlight is. And I'm going to start just bringing in maybe a little bit of the burnt ochre. Again, just bring that there, and I'm going to use the burnt ochre. So the burnt ochre is like an orangey, browny orangey colour. And I'm just going to start to bring in a little bit of that in here. And what I want to do is I want to put enough pigment in so that we can then start to work on details. So work on sort of bringing some of those tiny highlights in, you know, and we're starting to get a little bit more depth. So we've got some hairs that sort of coming in here and overlapping. And we're using exactly the same technique as we would if we were using let's put them back in there, as if we were doing the ear. Colour mixing book. Oh, Wendy, a colour mixing book for colour pencils. To be quite honest, I have no idea. I've never used a colour mixing book. I'm sure there will be some out there, and if anybody has any ideas, then please. Do you know, I bet Anne Kohlberg has got one, Wendy. I bet Anne Kohlberg has got a colour mixing book. But I don't. Sorry, that's the dog throwing himself on the floor. I don't tend to use. I don't tend to read books. Well, I do read books, of course I read books, but I don't tend to, use books for that sort of purpose. I tend to just sort of like have a bit of an experiment really and see what happens. But obviously I have, I've got colour knowledge because I worked in the print industry for so long, so I know about colour mixing. Gosh, honestly, he just moves around all of the time, and it's like moving a big articulated truck. It takes him about half an hour to get off the floor. Silly dog. So I'm just coming in here again and just starting to build these nice sort of soft highlights, and then I can just come in and pull in from here and start to actually put in a little bit of detail. So you can get details in quite quickly. You know, once you've got those initial layers down, the details can come quite quickly. And it is a bit fiddly because you've got to sort of get all of the idea of the hair sort of overlapping each other and layering over each other, and this is the stage where you look at it and you think, oh my god, that looks absolutely awful. And what, you know, in my head I'll be wittering onto you going, oh, and it's lovely and this, that and the other, and don't worry, and in my head I'll be thinking, what on earth are you doing, Bonnie? This is looking shocking, you know. Let's just hope it works, you know. But you know in your heart of hearts that it is going to work, because it always does, because that's how layering works. It looks a bit rubbish to begin with, and then once you start to really get in with the nitty-gritty and everything, then it actually starts to you know, to come together quite nicely. So just bring in a little bit more of that highlight there. And every time you take a little bit of the pigment away, you're giving yourself extra little bits of shapes to be able to work into. You know, and it's the shapes that you work into that kind of then make it look like hair and make it look like it's layered over the top of each other. So let's come down here again. So I'm just using the putty eraser at the moment, but I might bring in, once we've got a few more layers down, I might bring in the Scotch tape, because the Scotch tape is really good for really identifying, you know, those little sort of highlights and flyaway hairs and all of that type of stuff. I wouldn't necessarily bring the slice tool in at this point, because it would be a little bit too final. You know, you'd end up with too final marks that you wouldn't then be able to add to, or, you know, whatever. I ordered the pencil conversion chart from Kohlberg. Oh, yes, brilliant. Sounds correct. Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah. What's that colour you're using? This colour, Colleen, is the, hopefully this one is the burnt ochre. Oh gosh, Vinny and Slipper, I want to say hello to you all. They're quite tired. They've had a big run today. They've had a long walk this morning and they've had a big run this afternoon. Slipper's been very naughty. They had a treat for lunch, and they had some lamb bones in the garden, but Slipper likes to think that Vinny's lamb bones also belong to her, so she was in trouble. So and we're just briefing them for the new arrival who's coming on Sunday. So Nellie arrives on Sunday, so we're all very excited about that. She looks like a little brown fluffy bear and currently has green eyes. So we're all a bit giddy about Nellie arriving. So yeah, she's quite big actually. They are. I mean, she's a Newfoundland cross, so they are quite a big breed. You know, so she's not going to be a small 8-week-old puppy. She's going to be quite a chubber. But yeah, we're all getting quite excited about that. Okay. So just get a little bit more of that. In fact, I think what I might do now is just bring a little bit of the ivory in. And the ivory is there. These little short pencils. How do you get your eraser to a point? Mine just bends and goes floppy. Oh, hi Corinne, how are you? Yeah, how funny. I wonder if yours is too warm, Corinne. I wonder if it's too warm, and then it kind of just goes floppy. But what I tend to do is I'll sort of knead it like that, and it goes into a point, and then I'll sort of use it, and then I'll knead it again, and then I'll use it, and then I'll knead it again, and I'll use it. So that, but it could be that yours is maybe a little bit too warm. So yeah, I don't know, but that made me laugh a bit actually. Yes, you can use it on normal paper, Melissa. Yes, but what I would say is just check, that it's just check before you actually go, full tilt and start slicing. Some papers, it definitely works on the Bristol vellum. It definitely works on the Bristol plate. It definitely works on Fabriano. I've got the ivory here. This is the ivory, and I've started to use a little bit stronger pressure just to bring in some of these extra highlighted bits and to squash some of that tooth down as well. And I'm just going to bring that in. I should probably sharpen it, but I don't think I need to sharpen it. And you can see that it will actually make a, it'll come in over the top of that brown as well. Just bring that in there. And this just sort of smooths everything. Again, gives quite a nice base to sort of draw on. I would recommend not using polychromos white on anything until it's like a final layer, or whether you're going to put white in and then just leave it, because if you use the polychromos white, it kind of resists, so it's very difficult to then get colours in over the top. You can, of course, but it kind of leaves this funny like grainy texture behind it. It's a bit weird, so I'd say probably, don't use your white. Not that we're using white in here, but, just as a general tip, really. I'm looking forward to seeing Nellie. Yes, I'll be putting lots of photos up of Nellie. What's the difference between using a putty eraser and a normal eraser? Well, the putty eraser is really, really soft and gentle, and you can just basically sort of lift very gently. You can just touch it to the paper and it'll lift the pigment off. If I was going to use a normal eraser, and these probably be okay actually. These are the Derwent. This is a Technic eraser from Derwent. But if this I would have to actually do a proper erase. And what can happen is it can almost damage the tooth of the paper, and it's not actually done very much. The putty eraser is I find is the best eraser to use on pastel mat, because you're not rubbing, you're not using sort of like an abrasive action. So you keep the tooth of the paper intact. So I'm just going to use a little bit of the sorry, Vicky, I'm just kind of watching two things. Any tips for taking photos of your artwork, and can you watch it later? Any tips for taking photos of artwork? A lot of people like to take their photos of their artwork outside, because natural daylight is obviously better. I don't take mine outside just because I'm terrified of something blowing onto it, or so I tend to just have mine on my drawing board. I have my studio lights set, and I take a photo with my iPhone. Now, the problem when you're taking a photo with the iPhone is that the camera is so good that it picks up every single tiny little detail in your drawing. So if you've got a tiny bit of grain showing, even if you can't see it with the human eye, your iPhone will pick it up and go, oh, I'm going to enhance this, and then it enhances it, and you look at your photo and you're like, what? And it will look like you haven't blended anything ever, and it's quite frustrating actually. So I take them with my iPhone, and then I use the editing suite in the iPhone, the editing software in the iPhone. And there's a new, well, it's not new, it's been out for a couple of months, but there's a new function where you can reduce noise, and it's right at the end of the functionality, and it's pretty good. And basically it just kind of softens everything. It almost puts like a bit of a blur over it, so it softens everything and it doesn't look so grainy and gritty and sharp. This is the burnt yellow ochre again that I'm just sort of pushing up onto there, and then I'm going to use my putty eraser again just to sort of lift that out and soften again. So it's all about getting the lovely quality and the softness. And the thing is, you can't get any of the lovely details in until you've got, a few of your layers down. I'll just get some of this ivory in there as well. And then back to that burnt ochre. I mean, you know, I can spend hours on something like this. Just gently does it. And then I can just use my putty eraser again just to just gently dab off. So you've just got a tiny weeny little bit of pigment showing, but it's still there. Oh right, okay, yeah. Right, so just bring a little bit more of a, this is a bit smaller than I would normally do this drawing, but these tiny bits of highlighty bits that we can just start to bring in, and then I'm going to use that burnt yellow ochre again in the top there, and then I'm going to bring a little bit of the ivory in. On there, and then the other thing that I can do is I can bring a little bit of the either the graphite granite rose or the cinnamon. And the cinnamon, the polychromos cinnamon, works really well with the burnt ochre and the ivory. You know, so just bringing a little bit of that pinky tinge into some of those highlighted bits works quite nicely. So just pulling that in there. And again, we can just use the putty eraser just to lighten it. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use the some Scotch tape. Would I recommend white paper or off grey? I like white. I like white paper. So sort of like a warm white. I prefer a warm white, I think, to like a bright white. So I'm going to use Scotch tape. So this is the Scotch tape, just a roll of very grubby, hairy tape. It looks like this when I pull off a little piece. And I'm going to take this, which is is actually for nails, I think. It's an embossing tool. And I think it's for kind of blobbing bits of something on nails, if you're into that sort of thing. But it's got a really, really fine point on the end. Now, if you don't have one of these, that's fine. You can just use a really sharp pencil. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring in the Scotch tape and just add in some of the little hairs in over the top of this, because I want to make some of the texture, and I need it to be finer than what the putty eraser is giving me. But I have to get enough layers down, because otherwise the Scotch tape will take out everything. It'll just take everything out. You know, so you can kind of put it on your hand and just dab it off, but I'm just going to sort of lay it over very gently. We don't want to stick it right down, and then I'm just going to gently, and you can see actually it's taken quite a bit off there. Just gently bring in. Here we go, there's a bit there. So the more pigment we have down, the more we can actually really be quite controlled about where we're taking out. And I'm also going to bring in some sort of little wispy bits in there as well, because what I want to happen is I want to have all sorts of hairy bits that I can then work into and start to create some of these start to create a little bit of depth in the hair. Okay, so I'm now going to take I think I'm going to take the chocolate, and I'm going to sharpen it actually. Let's have some tea. I'm just going to sharpen this so that it's I've got quite a small point to go into some of those areas. Oh, thank you. Well, Whiskers, thank you so much. What white paper do I use the most? I use Pastel Matte, and I use Pastel Matte the most, and then I've just started to use, well, I'm saying I've just started, whether or not I will carry on using I might do. I'm not sure. I'm actually really enjoying the owl. Yeah, so I've just started to use the Hanamola Nostalgia, which I'm really liking. So you can see here I'm starting to bring in some tiny little details. I'm using the chocolate, and I can use it very, very lightly to get sort of like a really tiny amount of pigment in, or I can use it a little bit stronger. And what I'm wanting to do is just bring in some of that detail and show the depth in the hair in here, and bringing those little lines in has allowed me to kind of identify where some of these areas are. So I can start to actually build in, almost like so you can see the layering of the hair. Now what I tend to do with it, and I think I mentioned last week probably quite a lot actually, what I tend to do is I'll kind of try to draw the look and feel of the hair, but I won't try to create something that is identical to the photograph. You know, that's not what I end up wanting to do. You know, I'll kind of, if I put a bit of hair in that I think, oh, that looks okay, I'll go with it, I'll stick with it. You know, because a dog can just shake its head and all its hair will fall into a different place. So it's, to me, the position of the curls isn't important. What is important is getting the quality of the curls correct. So the colour correct, the feel of the hair correct, all of that type of thing. So it doesn't, you know, it's not an issue for me if I put an extra curl in or I miss a curl out, because, you know, it's going to change on a daily basis. So okay, and then just bring in a little bit more down here. So you can see I don't have to add a huge amount of layers before I can actually start to really bring in these detaily bits. And like I say, it might not be exactly the same, but who cares? Oops. God, I do that all of the time as well. I'll be whittering away, and then my pencil will drop on the paper, and then I end up with like a massive mark, and then I have to incorporate it into the drawing. I've got on my owl that I'm doing, I've got a great big, really big dint in the paper. I have no idea where it's come from, and it must have been from me being I don't know, not thinking about stuff. I do witter on about rubbish. Okay, so bamboo skewers instead of Scotch tape. I'm not sure what those are. And yeah, so yours looks like a squirrel's tail. I'm sure it doesn't get like a squirrel's tail. Used to thinking in maybe mention both GMT and your time zone. Oh right, okay. My time zone is Greenwich Mean Time +1. So maybe I'll just put UK time, and then I tend to just Google, to be honest. But actually, I've got a new calendar that's going up on my website. I think, well, it is on my new website, which hasn't been launched yet. But and there, apparently, you can go into all of the different events that I've got in there, and it will actually show them in your time zone, which is pretty good, actually. You know, so you can have one of my events and it will actually show you in your time zone what the event is, which is amazing. Right, so I'm going to come down here again. Sudden marks happen to me all of the time. Yeah. Oh, and that's really kind of you, Eve. Thank you. So again, just bringing in the. I mean, this is such a big, fat, clumsy eraser. And a big fat clumsy artist. That's what I am. Big fat clumsy eraser, but actually you can get some tiny details with it. It's such a good tool. But you can see how we're starting to get some quite nice detailing around here. I mean, to be honest, if I was doing this as a tutorial or on my own or whatever, and we were doing the whole, I'd start with the eyes and kind of work from there. I'd have kind of brought all of this bit in as well, which it's a bit tricky because we're not doing that. But I'm going to bring in a little bit of the Venetian red in, and I'm just going to bring in a touch of that. Now I know I'm using mostly the Studios, and it's purely because we've got some really tiny details in here. We've got some lovely subtle colours, and for me they are just the best pencils for the job, really. We'll probably bring a few more in on the ear down here, but for these sort of areas up here, they do work really nicely. And again, it's just a question of slowly does it, just slowly building everything up. It's coming up here and we'll get that wave in there. I've been trying to draw my owl today, but my eldest son decided he was going to, well, it's brilliant actually, but he's decided he was going to clear the kitchen out and the conservatory out. So, and then he's cleared the hall out, and then he's put something, he's built a dog lead peg rack thing. I think he's really bored, and so I've not really been able to get much drawing done because there's been an awful lot of noise. I was hoping to get my owl finished today, but I think it's going to be into the weekend, I think. So I've got a live drawing session tomorrow as well, drawing leather tomorrow with my patrons, so that's going to be, really looking forward to that, because leather is something that I really enjoy drawing. Okay. Do you find some of the reds and oranges to go down a little grainy? Yeah, it depends. Down centerline, depends what pencils they are. I tend to find the softer pencils. So if I was using something like let's just get a couple out now, and then I can show you. Hold on. She says two different. Oh, here we go. I mean, they're not the right colours and everything, but if I show you a Derwent Light Fast, this is natural brown, and if I show you a Caran d'Ache raw umber, if I put these down on the paper, in fact, let me just if I shimmy this over a bit, I can kind of demonstrate a little bit actually. Just move this over, keep that there. Move this over so we get a blank piece of paper over here. Oops, you can see some of these little splodges that come in as well on the pastel mat, and I give up with them. I just work around them. Let me just work in here. So if I just bring some of these in here, hopefully what you can see is you'll be able to see that they go down a little bit more grainy. They're probably not going to work today, but can you see that that's quite grainy? That's the luminance, and this is the light fast. That's not so bad, but that's quite grainy. These are very soft pencils. And then if I bring the and warranted, they're not sharp, but if I bring the Studio in, oh, you can see that's not as grainy, and the only reason is that, I mean, probably if I'd sharpened these, they might have been a bit better, but the only reason is that these are much softer, and they've also got a thicker core. If you have a look there, they've got a much thicker core, so there's more pigment comes out at the end of a softer pencil, and it kind of spreads over the surface of the paper more, so you kind of get more pigment coming out. And what tends to happen on the pastel mat is it kind of sits on the top. It sits on all of those. It doesn't go down into the tooth. It just sits on the top because it's a broader core, and it's a softer pencil. Whereas if you have something that's really hard and really like a narrow core, then you're more likely to kind of get into the tooth as well as on the top of the tooth, if that makes sense. It might be a complete load of rubbish, but there we go. So we just bring this back in again. She's looking pretty grim on the screen, I have to be honest, but it looks okay on my paper. So, highlighted bits. Highlighted bits. Yeah, oh gosh, I've got all sorts of things that... yeah, so down centre line, what I'm saying is it depends on what pencils you use as well. So, yeah. And how long hours does it take for you to draw like an A4 commission artwork like this one off camera? Oh, well, I've got the lovely Labrador. I've just done 2 Labradors and they were off camera. I did do a little bit of live drawing, but they were sort of, you know, they were commissioned work. And they took me, I'd say, but 40 hours, 40 plus hours, you know, something like that. Because I just get lost in it. And these days I'm not worried about, I used to be worried about, oh God, I need to get them out and I need to, you know, I've said I'm going to get them done by this time. These days I don't worry about that. Obviously I keep in touch with my client, but I don't, if something's going to go over, it's going to go over, you know. And for me, that is the pure joy of coloured pencil, is the fact that I get completely immersed in it and lost in it. So it's a job for me, you know, which obviously I love. But it's also, it's like a bit of a therapy for me as well. You know, I can be feeling really sort of quite tense, and I don't really get stressed or anything, but I have had sort of panic attacks in the past, a long time ago, and they do kind of rear their ugly head every now and again if something particularly stressful's happened. You know, but all I need to do is just start drawing, and then they disappear. You know, so for me, the colour pencil side of things is so important, because nothing's immediate. Everything is just, it is what it is, and it takes as long as it takes, and I don't have to worry about, you know, bashing something out in a day or whatever. It will take, if it takes 2 weeks, it takes 2 weeks, and so be it. So you know, and I've kind of come to terms with that, and actually I'm really embrace that now. Whereas, you know, you do find quite a few people, and I completely understand, because if they're making a living from it, you know, and it's taking them forever and ever to do something, then, you know, they're wanting to find ways of speeding it up. But for me, it's not something I don't want to speed anything up. If anything, I've slowed everything right down. You know, because I want to be able to put in, you know, all of the detail and everything that I want to put in. So some pieces don't take as long, and I think some pieces kind of just flow, but other pieces can really take a while, you know, but that's okay. I mean, I have done some pieces where I've finished the whole thing in a day, and I'm like, wow. They tend to be sort of smaller focus studies rather than a big portrait. I've got a yellow Labrador that'll be coming up next, and I've got a beautiful dapple grey with a really, really lovely bridle. So I'm looking forward to that. Okay, so just get this in here a bit. Struggling with my art, taking way too many hours. Why don't you like to use a Tombow? Does it not work well? Oh, well, if I use the Tombow, let me just get one out. One here. So I've got my little Tombow here. For me, it doesn't really work very well on the pastel mat. It doesn't really. And then I have to. What then happens is I've got to somehow get rid of the pencil marks. So if I try to kind of rub out, it doesn't really work very well. I mean, it takes the pigment out, but it's not. It doesn't work in the way that I want it to work. So I prefer to use the putty eraser, and that works much better. It just gently lifts out that the pigment. But the putty eraser works really well on, not the putty eraser, the Tombow works really well on smooth paper and on drafting film. You know, it really does work well. I'm using it on my owl at the minute, and it's good. Right, so I'm going to use that ivory again. Bonnie, do you ever use solvent in your work? I don't, no. I have in the past. And I never really particularly liked the effect I got, because I suspect it's because I didn't get enough layers down. You have to get a load of layers down really to get it to work properly, and I suspect that was the issue. But oh, now it's 1:08. I think we need to do. Do we need to do a clap, Vicky? You need to tell me if we need to do a clap. We need to stop. Oh, yes, clapping time. Thank you, Bonnie. I'll catch up later. Yes, it is. It's 1:02. So, yeah, we need to do a bit of a clap. And hi, Cynthia. It's really nice to see you. So, yeah, so I think we probably do sort of like pencils down, and we do like a bit of a clap. And if anybody wants to get a cup of tea or something if you're not in the UK, but we like to do a clap for the NHS and all of the key workers in the the problem is I just get so carried away. So we've got just a few seconds left to go, and then we can all start clapping. Gosh, those few seconds take a long time, don't they? We'll have a bit of tea as well. Oh, there we go. So we can all clap. Come on, doggies, clap. Clapping, Vishy. Hey? Clapping for the NHS. Do clapping. You're going to do groaning, Vincent, aren't you? I feel really daft sitting here in my studio clapping, but it's worth it. My sister's a doctor and has been involved in all of this, so I'm not clapping very loudly. I'm just kind of clapping. I might pat the dogs instead. Clap, clap, clap. Come on, Flippy, clap your paws. There we go. Oh, so it's very important to make sure that we appreciate our amazing NHS. So what are some papers that could be substituted for the paper you're using for the owl? Barbara, you could use any smooth paper. You could use a cartridge paper. You could use Fabriano Artistico. You could use Fabriano, the Technic one, the number 4. You could use Bristol Smooth. You could use Bristol Vellum. You could use one of the what else could you use? You could use like a mixed media, anything. Oh gosh, I'm not keeping up. Oh, there we go. So Vicky's saying I'm not keeping up with the messages. Well, that's because I don't always see them, Vicky. I'm so sorry. I've got YouTube on so I can see the messages on YouTube, and then yours flash up, but I don't always see them because I'm whittering away. So I don't know. I'm useless. Good job I've got Vicky to keep me on the straight and narrow. So yeah, any smooth paper, will work really well. The owl, I have to say, I am really enjoying drawing the owl. Really enjoying drawing it. I've got to the scary bit, which is the wing. And it is scary, and I'll tell you why it's scary. And I explain actually in the tutorial why it's scary for me. And that is because the tiny details are really quite specific. And you'll know if you've followed my work before, or you've followed some of my tutorials, yes, I create realistic looking animals, but I'm not very specific when it comes to, and I know it sounds silly because my work's really detailed, but I'm kind of, not cut corners, but I'll kind of make stuff up as I go along, and you can't really see it in the finished piece. But on the owl, the patterns on the wing are so specific, And I have likened them to the top of a Bakewell tart, you know, where you kind of put your circles in and then you drag something across it. That's what they look like on the owl. And of course I've got no way of doing that on the paper, you know, being able to kind of drag the pigment in that fashion. So you know, I'm having to sort of really sit there and tell myself to slow down, draw what you see. And I've found it quite challenging, I have to say, to not kind of try and go, oh, it'll be right, and we'll just put a load of stuff in, because it doesn't work like that. I have to be really, really specific with these details. So that's made me actually really kind of take a breath, take a step back and go, right, hang on a second, slow down. You know, so that was quite interesting, actually. I have absolutely loved drawing the tummy. The tummy of the owl is just that. I mean, that is my happy place, I think, drawing owl tummies. It's because it's on the white paper, and it's just sort of all of the colours merged in, and I'm like, oh, I'm seeing a bit of yellow here, so I put a bit of yellow in, then oh, I'm seeing a bit of, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is working, actually, this is looking okay. And the paper that I'm using is taking a lot of layers, and it takes quite a lot of stick, actually, because there's parts of it where I've really gone at it hammer and tongs, and I've gone to bed with a sore wrist. And actually drawing on the pastel mat tonight has been quite a relief, actually, because I'm using such light pressure. On the smooth paper I was using quite hard pressure, you know, so it's I'm really enjoying that owl, and I think I might have to do something else soft and white on this paper. You know, I'm kind of getting into my groove now, I think. You know, sort of understanding how the paper works and everything. But yeah, I am really enjoying it. So Stonehenge, yes, Barbara, Stonehenge would be a really good one, actually, because Stonehenge has got a similar sort of, I don't know what you call the pattern on it. It's got like it almost is like a cold press paper, you know, like a cold press watercolor paper with all of the lumps and bumps on, that's been completely ironed out, but you can still see a few of the creases, but the creases aren't raised, so there's a definite texture to it, but it's smooth. You know, you don't run your finger over it and think, oh, it's bumpy. And it's a hard paper, so it's not sort of spongy, whereas the Stonehenge is a little bit spongier, but it's nice. It is really nice. And if you want to go and look at an artist who uses it on a regular basis, I think I've mentioned her before, Amy Schutz. It's AMISHUTZ. She's a German artist. She's incredible. I've got one of her prints on my wall. She is incredible, and she uses the Hannah Müller Nostalgie really, really well. I have to say, I haven't ventured into drawing anything dark with fur. I think I'll just stick with white feathers. I think I'll stick with. I'll maybe do a swan next on it, but it is a nice paper. And it's I'm not going to say it's cheap, because it's not cheap, but I bought a pad of 50 sheets and it wasn't expensive. You know, and those 50 sheets, they're going to last me quite a while. When I'm watching you, I always think, oh, that looks great. Then you keep going and make it even better. Oh, that's sweet of you, Jeff. I never know when to stop. Now, you see, this never knowing when to stop, that's a really interesting one, because somebody said to me the other day, you know, when do you know when to stop? And I've heard some artists say, when you think you're finished, do another 10 layers. And I say, when you think you're finished, put your pencil down, because you're finished. I always think leaving something with a little bit less than what you anticipated, or, you know, because it's very easy to overwork a piece. So I just think, do you know what, if you're happy with something, leave it. That's it, finished. You know, and then we're all happy. So again, this is the copper beech that I'm using here, just to kind of bring a little bit of these bits in here. And it could be that I work on an area like this for a couple of hours. It's very boring watching, but you know, the other thing as well is I've been drawing on smooth paper all week, so, you know, kind of coming into the pastel mat is like, whoa, what is this? But it definitely just needs those nice layers, you know, building up. Right, and then let's get some of that chocolatey colour in here as well. Darker, and I haven't used any hard pressure except for when I was using the ivory, so everything has been really, really smooth pressure. And once you get a few layers on, then it's much easier to get in all of your your detaily bits. And I always find the details kind of just sort of arrive when you're using pastel mat. You know, you're so busy sort of layering and putting colour and everything, and then you look at it and you go, oh, yeah, it's got a bit of detail there, that's all right. Oh, Cavachon love his soft floppy ears, I know. People mistake my slipper for some sort of a spaniel sometimes when they see her with, when they see pictures of her with Vincent, because Vincent makes her look like a little tiny spaniel, whereas actually she's quite a large dog. And he's just like, he's so funny. He's like a comedy dog. He's got a comedy nose, and he's kind of got a whole comedy face really. And he's so sweet natured. You know, he just wants to kind of please you all the time and just be, and he's quite happy. And he's just really gentle, but in a very big body. But he's a darling. You're a darling. Oh, where has he gone? You're a darling, aren't you, Vincey? It's just gigantic. He sits, I must take a picture actually when we go to the field, because he doesn't sit on my knee, but kind of sits nearly on my knee in the front of the car. So he gets terribly car sick, and he has to go in the front rather than in. I've got a big estate car, and Slipper goes in the back, but he can't go in the back because you'll go 5 minutes down the road and he's sick. So we put him in the front with me. And we have this thing now where I get in, I leave one leg hanging out of the car, and Vincent then climbs puts his front paws onto the middle console, then gets the rest of his body in. I shut the door, then he manoeuvres his body back around, so his front paws are on my knee and the rest of him is on the floor. And then we have to open the window and he sticks his head out. And it must look hilarious. But yeah, that's how he needs to be. So we're trying to wean him so he goes in the back of the car, but he just is sick all of the time. So I think because he tries to stand up, whereas Slipper just lies down. Right, so let's get a little bit more of that. What are you doing now seems very true to the details on the photo, but what do you do when you get to the ear where the hair locks are not exactly like the picture? Oh, I just make it up as I go along, Kate. What I'll do is I'll kind of work with what I've got on the ear bit here, and then I'll just start to bring colour and I can even, because everything's really soft still in the ear, I can change things if I need to. You know, so I can sort of start to bring a little bit of the colour into here, and I can actually change the direction of the hair if I need to do. You know, it's quite easy to sort of take the information out and draw over the top of it. So I don't really get bogged down with that, and I know that what I've done is there's bits of it that are the same, but there's lots of it that's completely different. You know, and I guess it's the type of artist you are as well. You know, some people who you know, if you're very controlled, and there's no right or wrong way of doing anything, but if you're quite a controlled person and you need to have everything in the right places, then that can be quite a scary thing. You know, it can be quite scary, kind of going a little bit rogue. You know, sort of well, it's almost freehand, isn't it? Because, you know, you've got no lines there at all. You're kind of on your own, really, and you've got to be looking at lights and shades and shapes and all of that type of stuff. And if you are quite controlled and you need everything to be exactly the same as the photo, then I would absolutely recommend that you do what you need to do. You know, it's all very well me saying, oh, loosen up and it doesn't matter, but we're all so different, and we all have such different personalities. And, you know, somebody coming to draw this and me saying, don't worry about it, just, you know, just be loose and whatever, that might freak them out completely. And it'd be like, oh my God, I can't do that. I you know, I have to have everything in the right place. And I would say, you know, that is something that's really important. Always work to your strengths. You know, always work with what you've got as an artist, because then it's going to be much more enjoyable. There's nothing worse than doing something that you're not enjoying. And you know what? Just recently, I've realised life is so short, and you know, it is not worth doing stuff that you don't like doing. It really isn't, because life is just too short. You know, so it's if you don't like doing something, don't do it, basically. So we're all going to stop doing work. We're just going to draw. Yeah, I would say, you know, if you're okay kind of doing your own thing, then fine. But if you're not, then don't, because you're only going to stress yourself out, and nobody wants that. So I'll just come in here again. I'm just in my head. I think I don't know whether I mentioned it last week about how I choose colour, and how I have this whole process that goes on in my head as I'm talking. So I'll be chatting away, talking about, I'm putting this down and I'm using this pressure and everything, and I'll be thinking about the next stage of the drawing as I'm talking, and I'll have colours and tools and everything sort of floating in and out of my head, and I'll kind of be either I'll be having a conversation in my head about them. Well, that colour would work, but would it work with this, and would it work with that? And it's the same with tools. So now what I'm thinking is I want to bring in these like little floaty hairs here, and I'm thinking, do I bring in the slice tool here? Do I bring in some sort of slicey, little slicey lines? Do I come back in again with the Scotch tape and put these little lines in with the Scotch tape? Or do I take like a really sharp, maybe the granite rose would work, you know, to bring in, that would actually work. Or do I bring in that one would work actually, the Museum Aquarelle. I could bring the Museum Aquarelle in, and I could bring in some sort of, like, you can see there how the white's not the best colour, but in my head I've got all of these different scenarios going on. Is this going to work? Is that going to work? You know, and it's for me, that's quite an important part of my process, is working out you know, how things are going to happen before I actually start on them. So are you going to show this, please, Kate? Oh, what I don't know what show what, Kate. The ear. Yes, I will. If you were to draw this on smoother paper such as Bristol vellum, would you still follow the same method as pastel mat? That's a really good question, Brian. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't follow the same techniques. I'd follow the same techniques in the fact that I'm doing layering, and I've decided I'm going to look at using the Scotch tape. So I would follow the same techniques with the layering, but I would need to really, really keep these highlighty bits clean right from the start. I couldn't keep going over the top. I can rub out, so I can use a rubber to take things out, but I would need to kind of plan a lot more, because I don't have the ability to put an awful lot of layers in. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start to bring in some sort of gentle, this is working a little bit better now because I've got more layers in, but just start to bring in a few of these bits, and I just want to bring in some of these sort of floaty areas. Just going to turn it around a bit. So this is sort of like an ongoing thing with pastel mat. you know, you kind of put in, you take out, you put in, you take out, you put in, you take out, and I do like to use that technique in you know, on other papers as well. But I do think with smooth paper you would probably, I think you would probably want to keep your highlighty bits isolated, really. So I'm just going to bring in the ivory in here with quite strong pressure, and I'm just going to sort of flick in where I bought some of those fluffy bits in. Okay, and then I'm going to come back to using probably the Copper Beech. Is Vinny's tail as fragile as Idle's horse? Oh gosh, breaking tail. Well, his tail, quite honestly, he's like a kangaroo. His tail, I mean, he's a massive dog, and his tail is as long as his body. It's huge. And he kind of started to grow into it, because obviously when he was smaller, his tail was kind of around the same size as it is now. But he's yeah, but he's not. I wouldn't say it was sensitive. We've not had any issues with it anyway. But I guess it's long because he needs it to balance. And my goodness, can he run? You know, we take him running every day. You know, just for a sort of a short sprint around the field. But I think his tail is there for balance. So he is pretty much like a kangaroo. Bless him. He's not caught anything either yet. We tend to we get to the field and we do a lot of shouting, so everything disappears. I don't want him catching anything. What kind of colour pencils are? So I'm using, at the moment, I'm using Polychromos, and I'm using the Derwent Studios. You love my pep talks, Kate. I sometimes go off on one. Well, I don't go off on one. I don't get, but sometimes I get, like, you know, I can get quite passionate about stuff, and I probably need somebody to tell me to shut up. I'm sure there's plenty of people out there who want me to shut up. This Sue is the embossing tool. So it's like I bought it from Amazon. I bought a few of them, actually. I don't think I've got any more. One end is thick, so this end's quite thick, and this end's quite thin. And it's I think I got them for about £5, and there's about 4 of them in the packet. So I am seeing shiny lines that reflect light at a certain angle when using the slice tool and drafting film. Oh, that's interesting, Barbara. In fact, what drafting film are you using? Are you using the Duralar? Because the Duralar, it's a funny one. It when you use the slice tool, it does a really good job, but it takes the surface off. And it almost sort of carves into the paper. It's quite interesting, actually, how it works. But on the graphics drafting film, it doesn't do that. I just need to bring a little bit more of this in here. Middle schooler, the pencils are listed up in the. Oh, that's all right. I know. How clever am I to have listed all of them? And you know, that's. For me, that is so incredibly organised to have done that, because normally I forget everything. And then what I'll do is I'll start using pencils that I've not even listed. And everybody will be like, hang on a second, you said you were going to be using these. I'm like, yeah, well, I've changed my mind. I'm using this one now. So, oh, hi, Lone Star Working Dogs. What a lovely name. Hi. And Kate, no, don't shut up. It's your passion that makes it. Oh, thanks, Kate. And hi, Susan. Oh, is it the graphics drafting film, or is it the graphics Duralar, Barbara? Does it come in a pad? That's right. Yeah, the nail artists use them. My dog's adorable. Well, yeah, they can be. They're actually really good. They're actually really well behaved. I mean, both of them are in my studio now. Both of them are fast asleep. I say to them, when I start work in the morning, I'm like, right, come on, we're off to work, and they come and they've got their places where they lie, and I'm gonna have to find a spot for Nellie. I think she's gonna have to find a place to be. But they are good dogs. They are good dogs, and they're friendly dogs as well. That they are big. I get comments, when I'm walking them in the village in the morning. Well, I walk them in the fields and then come back through the village. And there's this one man that keeps popping his head up. Walking the horses, are you? Taking the horses out for a walk? As we're trotting up the lane. So I keep on threatening to get like a wheelbarrow. Oops, there goes my burnt ochre. Yeah, we're all right. A wheelbarrow or something like that, and sit in the wheelbarrow and get them to pull me around the village. I think that would be quite fun. I think once I've got 3 dogs, I should be able to do that. So let's bring a little bit of this burnt ochre in here. So you can see this bit here looks a bit gritty on the screen really, but actually it's starting to come quite nicely. So I'm going to use a little bit more of love my honesty. Well, yeah, I'm kind of one of those people that I sort of wear my heart on my sleeve. When if you get to know me, I don't keep anything back. So you end up sitting there going, oh God, did she really just say that? No, I'm not that bad, but I just like talking. I just like chatting to people. But I am quite an introvert, so I do really, really enjoy my own company. I do enjoy my own company. And actually during the lockdown at the minute, it's been really good that I've actually had company. I have actually had, I have maybe 2 or 3 calls a day, with different people all over the world, and that's been really good for me, because I would have very, very easily just locked myself away and not seen anybody. Send my daughter out shopping, just stay inside. Well, take the dogs out for walks and everything, but I'm just really happy with in my own company really, and with my dogs and my children. So let's put a little bit of dark in there. So you can see this is slow. I'm sorry it is slow, but you'll have to go follow Jason Morgan. He'll do you a speedy Spaniel. We still need to work out our little, I don't know whether it might be a Q&A or something. I think that'd be quite cool actually. I'm going to be doing some more like Q&A things on Instagram as well. I did one with the lovely Maddie from Mafito Art, and I've got a couple more people lined up, to do on Instagram, just to sort of like do a live little session on Instagram, which I think is quite nice really. It's quite a nice platform to do a live thing on, except you have to see my face, which I'm never that keen on, because I have to end up putting makeup or something on. Well, actually I don't. I say to everybody, I'll do my hair and I'll put some makeup on, and then I never do. I just put my glasses on and hope nobody sees me. Oh, thank you, Lobo. That's really sweet. On your nap my lap for Nelly, I know. So you probably will be as well. Yes, introverts unite. Yeah, alone. Yeah. Normal state is social isolation. Absolutely. But I'm still really, really happy, in company. And actually, I was chatting to somebody talking on email to somebody the other day, and we were talking about confidence and how confidence is actually, it's really tricky. If you lack confidence, it's really, really hard. And what I was saying, what's really helped me is to actually, not physically, although you could do it physically, but is to sort of do some visualization where you actually put a different hat on. And there are all sorts of like management things about hats and all of that type of stuff. But if you can put a different hat on, and you can almost sort of physically put it on your head or pretend to put it on your head, and the hat that you're putting on is a confident person, you can actually start to become more confident, or build those confident habits up, so that every time you've got to try and do something, even if it's like answering the door, or, talking to a client on the phone or something like that, you can put a hat on and become somebody who is confident. And then once you've done that, you can take the hat back off and you can become you again. But the more you practice the habits of somebody who is confident, the more you are likely to one day wake up and actually not have to put the hat on. And we talked about that, and it was quite a useful analogy, I think. Sort of physically putting another hat on, so you almost act as a different person, a person who is confident. And it's definitely along the lines of faking it till you make it. And it's not something you can do all of the time, because it's exhausting. Being something you're not is exhausting. But just sort of putting these different hats on, in moments of sort of where you struggle a little bit, I find that really, really helpful, because I was a very, very shy child. I wouldn't say boo to a goose. Didn't really like. I liked horses and animals. And that's what I tended to. I lived on a farm, and that's what I did. I just lived with the animals. But obviously, as you kind of grow up, you kind of have to become more confident. I've learned these strategies that you can kind of just act your way into confidence. And then once you sort of get used to those skills and how it feels to be confident, then it becomes a lot easier. And it gets to the point where you just have to take a deep breath. Right, off we go. And that's that's a lot of how I kind of get on with stuff, really. It's just trying to make things easier for people who really struggle with their confidence and stuff. And I think knowing that there's stuff out there, knowing that there are strategies you can. Oh, Vinny, sounds like a drill. That the strategies out there that you can use to kind of help with that, with the confidence, I think is, I think it's good to know that you can do that, because a lot of the time you just think, well, I'm not confident, so I can't. This is something I can't do, but actually, you can. And the other thing as well is knowing that people are always willing you to succeed. You very rarely get somebody watching you on. If you're doing a speech or you're doing something live or whatever, you very rarely get somebody who's sitting there going, oh, I hope she cocks up, because nobody wants that. They want you to succeed. So, all of these little things, it can really help. I'm going to do some coaching, Zoomy sessions, I think, bringing in some strategies that can kind of help people get over certain scary things in life. Because there are some fantastic models and methods and stuff like that I think would be really. I think people would be. I think it would really help people. It certainly helped me. Dog resembles a male lion with a mane at present. Oh, thanks, Daryl. I think he looks like a lab with big fluffy ears. I tend to be happiest with just my eskies for company. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, I do. I love my dogs. And I love my child. I love having my children around. And I'm very lucky to have all three of them at home with me, and it's I really, really enjoy that. I mean, there can be little gits every now and again, especially my 15-year-old. So I have soundproofed my ceiling, but I can still hear him. I think I'll have to move him to the attic. Okay, so I'm just bringing in a little bit of the granite rose up on here. Vinny, you need to sit down. No, is it you too warm? He's looking at me through my glass drawing board. Are you too warm? You're naughty, aren't you? You have to go and sit down. So the granite rose is a really good one for just adding that sort of like little touch of something in there. Probably need to lighten this up a little bit as well, actually. Maybe gone a little bit too dark. That's one of the things I either go too light or I go too dark. I get carried away. I don't suppose it matters really that much. I think sort of seeing how I work, you know, and everybody works differently, and you know there might be another coloured pencil artist who, you know, will draw much quicker than me, and they might actually have a style that you prefer, and I always think, you know, I think it's good to sort of follow a few people. It's good to kind of see what different artists do, because you know, you can then find your own way, you know, and that's I think that's really important. So let's just pull a little bit more into there. Need some more tea, I think. Oh, it doesn't look very nice on the screen at all. A dog with pigtails. Oh dear. It looks really nice and smooth on my drawing board. Right. So what time are we on? 8:30. I think what we'll do, I don't know, does anybody want to have a look at the owl? I mean, I'm not going to draw anything on it because I'm doing it as a tutorial, but I could kind of give you a little bit of a glimpse, and you can have a look at you know, some of the areas that I've been doing, and you know, so if anybody wants to see the owl, let me know, and I'll just bring it onto the drawing board. Oh, thanks, Carissa. I can just bring the little owl onto the drawing board quickly and show you before we go, if anybody wants to see it. If you don't want to see it, that's fine. But it's oh, that's fine. Thank you. That's really kind. I always think, oh, this is going right, all right, and then yes, owl. You want to see the owl? Oh yes, okay, right. I'll go and get the owl. I don't know where I've put it. Oh, it's over there. I'll go get the owl and I'll show you the owl. Let's put that in there. Right. You stay there, Doogies. Okay, so might have to just... so I'll show you this first. Let's bring that out a little bit and then we can see that. Just need to, it's not going to stay, is it? Hang on. It's because I've got this big board on the table. Let me move the board off. And then, oops. Let's put that there. Right, okay, so then you can kind of see, let me just focus that, you can kind of see some of the colours that I've been, and then I've got Nellie's vet appointment here. But you can see some of the colours that I've been trying to work out what I'm going to use for the owl, because there's like a bright orange. But you can also see that the paper is really smooth. So I've got this next to me all of the time, and then we've got this little owl. Do you know, I'm so happy with this little owl. I'm really happy with him. He's so cute. Well, somebody mentioned that I need to put his trousers on because it looks a bit rude at the minute. Yeah, I am really, really happy about my owl. There's something about your voice. Feel free to laugh at me. I'm not very good at listening to virtual stuff, but I love it. Oh, that's kind of you, Teresa. I used to have elocution lessons, you know. I used to talk like the Queen. I don't anymore. I started working with people from Leeds. And then I started to have like a really broad accent. But yeah, so this is the owl. I really love this owl. I'm working on this bit here, and I'm just going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit more. But I'm going to get rid of the dog's head because we don't need to get rid of it. Let me see the dog's head. And let me just focus. Focus a bit more. So you can see this bit here. And what I'm having to do here is I'm having to really, really just be really careful about what I'm doing and the detail and everything I'm putting in. And this bit here, honestly, I was dreading it because I'm quite good at drawing. I know I'm quite good at drawing, but I'm quite good at doing textures, you know, so I'm quite good at getting all of this stuff in. And the tummy, oh my goodness, I love the tummy. I absolutely love this to me. And I really love doing the face because it's all about texture. But when it comes to this bit here, you know, actually I had to really concentrate to get this patterning in. And like, it's like a Bakewell tart. I told you it was like a Bakewell tart. It's just like a Bakewell tart. But I was like, right, okay, God, I'm really going to have to be really slow down now and really work out where all of these little, you know, and this isn't the same as what's on the photograph at all. But this is what I was saying about having to really, really slow down, take a breath. I had to work out in these little bits here. I'll just get the pencil and then I can point them out. So these bits here, what I had to do was I had to put one in and then kind of work out, they all kind of went in a straight line down there. And then I had to do bits that I knew I could get in the right place, and then go back up here and go, right, well, if this is here, then this is here. And that's kind of how I've had to draw this. It's been yeah, these bits where I'm blending and all of that type of stuff, that is like second nature to me. It's not, I don't find that challenging, but it's these tiny little details. I find them really challenging because I kind of, I fake stuff. I kind of just go in and I'm like, you know, I was going to say, I would imagine they know exactly what the wings and everything are called. And it's the same, isn't it, with horses? You know, if you know horses and you know that, you know, how horses work and all of that type of stuff, if you get something wrong, you know, like hair going the wrong way or whatever, somebody who doesn't know horses, they're not going to notice, but somebody who does know horses are going to go, well, you've got that the wrong, you know. So I know that I'm just looking at a lovely photograph and I'm kind of interpreting that photograph as a drawing. But I find these bits here really, really hard, you know, and I think it's, when I do tutorials, I tell people that, I say how, you know, if I'm really struggling with something, and I'll tell you why I'm struggling with it and how I'm going to try and overcome that struggle. And I think it's really important to kind of voice that, you know. That's really kind, Jackie. I don't think he'd be getting worried at all. I mean, he's the bird king. But so this bit here, this wing bit here, this has got a huge amount of detail in here. So I'm just working very, very gently in with the colours. But this paper is lovely, honestly, and I'm not a smooth paper person, and I don't particularly like Fabriano Artistico, and I don't like the Bristol Vellum, but this paper is really nice. It's a bit flimsy. I think it's about 190 grams, something like that, so it is a little bit flimsy and it can mark, so I don't know whether you can see there. I think that's where a pencil hit it and you've got like a big mark, so it can mark, but it's I really like it as a paper, but I don't know how I would like it if I was drawing something with fur, because it's getting all of the detail and everything in there. If that's what's the furry detail, that's what's a little bit difficult. But this bit here, I think this is the favourite thing I have ever drawn. This little tummy here, it's a lot of hard pressure. It's Hanamula Nostalgia. In fact, I'll get the pad so you can have a look at what it looks like. Come on. So it's this is what it looks like. And it's like this big thick pad. It's 50 sheets in there, and it wasn't that expensive. And like, oh yeah, it is. It's 190. So it is quite thin, but it's archival. It's non-aging. It's acid free. It's a nice paper. And I'm really well. Do you know what, Catherine? I'm not sure whether I am going to put the bondage bits on his ankles. I've drawn them in, and that is exactly one of the things that I was thinking. I just move him up a little bit, his little bondage. And I was thinking, actually, I might get some more owly legs and take these bits out, because obviously he's a kept owl. Yeah, I might just take these out and not put them in. I've not decided yet, but yeah. I mean, they're not particularly attractive either, so I might just take those out. But yeah, I would say, you know, if you like a smooth paper, so these in here, I've used a lot of what have I used a lot of? I've used a lot of luminance. So I've used a lot of the let's get these out here. That one, and then so a lot of the buff titanium, the lot of luminance buff titanium, and then I've got in this bit here, I've got the brown ochre 10%, I've got the burnt ochre 10%, I've got, oh my goodness, this is the best pencil, the sepia 10%. This pencil is amazing, just amazing. This is what I've used for all of the darker areas. It's fantastic. I've used a little bit of the oyster, the Light Fast oyster, which is like a really bright pink. Yes, no, I'm sure he doesn't call them ankles. We had this conversation about dogs, about Vinny's knees. I was like, oh, you know, Vinny's knees are very low to the ground. And my daughter was like, he hasn't got knees. And apparently they're wrists. They're not knees, they're wrists. But I was calling them knees. Anyway, and then the Derwent Light Fast, the Flesh Pink, that was another really good one. And then over the top of everything, the buff titanium. But then this amazing one, again, the granite rose. So I've brought this in really, really hard in places, and I've got this lovely sort of smooth birdie tummy, and it's just worked so nicely. Honestly, it's been so much fun to draw. You know, when you just fall in love with something, it's just fabulous. Just joined and guess what you're drawing, your favourite drawing again. Are you like these? Are you like this with biscuits? Oh, I think these are the best biscuits I've ever. Yeah. Oh, I was so fickle. I'm so fickle. Yes, kept owl like a kept woman. I'm very fickle. I know, I just fall in love with everything. It's sad, isn't it? But what's really nice about this is we've got the really, I could go on with this about it forever. It's really nice because it incorporates warm and cool. So, you know, for somebody kind of learning or wanting to learn a little bit more about the colours and kind of connecting the colours and incorporating colours, you know, bringing in all of the warmth down this side and then starting to change it so that you get the coolness of this side. You know, actually it's quite nice to do, and then you can kind of incorporate some of your cool colours in with your warm colours, and then, you know, trying to get something that looks white but bringing in a ton of colour. It's just, yeah, it is. It's really nice. What's the best way to prevent wax bloom? Well, I've never really had wax bloom. I've never really experienced it. And actually, it was something that I was thinking about on this, thinking, oh gosh, I'm going to end up with wax bloom because I'm really going for it. And then I was thinking, well, actually, I'm not sure it would show up with it being such light colours. And this has been, I mean, I did this last night and there's nothing on it. It's exactly the same as it was last night. So I think it's okay. And of course I'm using the luminance, but and then I'm using the Light Fast, which are more oily based, but I don't know. I haven't really experienced wax bloom before, so these feathers. I know I'd love to do that sort of blending and getting all of the shadows and all of that type of stuff, and I really enjoy doing that. You fall in love with new stuff. Our wish list. I know. I'm so sorry. Honestly, Alexandra, isn't it? It's the best colour. It is the best colour. Have you seen a cat with very fine crimped hair? I had one, very unusual, and the colour went in fine stripes too, like a pheasant. Oh no, I haven't seen one like that. That sounds like an interesting cat. Anyway, so there's the owl, and I hope you enjoy drawing the spaniel. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm going to carry on drawing the spaniel, and I think just sort of chatting away, and you know, if you want to ask questions and all of that type of stuff on a Thursday, that would be really good. And then once we've kind of done a little bit more on the Spaniel ear, maybe I'll do something on a smooth paper, something that's sort of white. I think that might be quite nice. The Tombow works really well on the owl. These little feathers here, they were brought in with the Tombow, and I brought in these bits here were brought in with the Tombow. So the Tombow works really well on this smooth paper. But I will. I'll say goodbye. It's 10 to 9, and I'm sure you've had it completely enough of me. But it's so nice of you to join me, and I hope you're all okay. And don't forget, if ever you need any help, or you want to chat or whatever, and you know how much I love chatting, just send me a message. Thank you all, and hopefully I'll see you all next week. See you later.